Good morning, good afternoon. Dear panelists, please turn on your videos. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining the 23rd session of the Sustainability Insight. Firstly, I'd like to introduce our organizing team from UNESCO Jakarta. My name is Sachi Suzuki, JFIT coordinator. Here we have Lokmi Hamdani Akbar, Gani Mulia, Chipta Matsanda, and Martin Lajobunsu. The title of today's session is Responsible Science Communication for Evidence-Based Decision-Making. We proudly present Professor Shahbaz Khan, the Director of UNESCO Regional Science Bureau for Asia and the Pacific, as a moderator. And we have two distinguished speakers, Professor Della Bacaltos, Professor Six, Davao del Sur State College, Digos City, Philippines, and Professor Joan Leach from Australian National Centre for Public Awareness of Science, Australian National University College of Science. We are ready to take your questions through Q&A box and Facebook comments. If you wish to receive the certificate, please fill the attendance form, which we will share during the webinar. Professor Shahbaz, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear Dr. Sachi. What a wonderful day to have two very, very eminent professors with us. As Sachi has described, from the Philippines, Dr. Della Grace, who is a great supporter of UNESCO programs, and we will hear about sustainability science, Help Davao Network, and also about a very special scorecard and many other things, and how do we engage with communities. And then, of course, most welcome also to Professor Joan Leach, a great communicator herself, of course, but she has been the president of Australian Science Communicators. And as Sachi has introduced, she is heading a very important center, Australian National Centre for Public Awareness about Science. She also links with many initiatives in the world, which are related to science communication, including the work related to science museums. So let's start to understand, what do we mean by this important area of science communication? We can do wonderful science, but if we don't communicate it, we will not be able to reap the full benefits. But at the same time, if the science is not correct and the communication is too good or irresponsible, we can also be in trouble. So let me begin first with Professor Joan. Joan, what is your understanding or take on responsible science communication, and what would be the irresponsible science communication? Over to you, Joan.
Thank you so much for this. And now is such an important time for us to be asking and answering that question. Obviously, the pandemic brings out a lot of these issues. So it's really important to ask ourselves what we expect from science and what we expect from science communication right now. And in the case of responsible science communication, I think there are three sort of big issues. One of those is that a responsible science communication is inclusive. And so that people use that word all the time, inclusive, but it's actually a very, very difficult thing to do well, to be inclusive. And that means involving both scientists, researchers, as well as communities. And so responsible science communication tries to get as many voices around the table as it possibly can. The other thing about responsible science communication is it's willing to negotiate. Okay, so facts are facts, but our understanding of those facts can change. And that's how science works, right? We're looking for that, but on our way to find out about the world, our ideas about that can change. And so good science communication recognizes that, to negotiate that. And so it's one of those things, there's a lot of interest right now about misinformation. And one of the things about a lot of the fake news around is it doesn't negotiate. It tries to tell you what to think, and it's such a sign, right, that it's fake because it won't negotiate. But responsible science communication will kind of negotiate. And finally, I think there's a really important feature of responsible science communication, and that's that it has the public good in mind. That it's not just about telling people what to think about science. And it's not just communicating to people the facts, but it also keeps an eye on why they need to know those things and why they might want to know other things. So there's a public good angle to responsible science communication that I think is also really important. So those three things: inclusivity, the ability to negotiate, and an eye to the public good. I think those are the things that make responsible science communication.
That's very, very comprehensive definition. I really learned a lot from this. But it must be very hard to be inclusive, also to make sure this public good angle is there and negotiation is there. Can I take this one step further, Joan? Is it the responsibility of the scientists themselves to be science communicators, or science communicators are special people like you?
So I think the answer is both. And I, science communication isn't easy.
Yeah.
So I think the answer is both. I think that the scientific community across the world has taken on more responsibility for science communication. And there's a willingness of researchers to make sure that they can communicate their science well. However, researchers have a finite amount of time. They need to be in the lab or doing their field work. And so others need to help. And those are science communicators. And over the last 30 years, that group of people, that discipline, that practice, profession, has grown up in different ways around the world to create a cohort of people who are trained to do science communication. Many of them come out of science themselves. So the answer is both, Shahbaz. We need good quality scientists who are willing to negotiate, but they need help from science communicators.
Okay, I have many more questions for you, Joan. Just from your introduction, I will come back to you. And of course, you are heading this very special center, which is Australian National Center for Public Awareness about Science. So I think you have described the objectives of that science center in a way through this inclusiveness, through be able to negotiate and science as a public good. But let's continue in a moment. And I would like to now turn to Professor Grace, who is in Davao today in the Mindanao in Philippines. Grace, you have been a scientist yourself, and you have been working with many parts of society, including politicians, including NGOs. In your view, to be able to communicate and to make an impact, what are the key elements? What is the experience from Davao for you with different initiatives you have been working with?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Shahbaz. Actually, I want to take note of what Professor John has said about inclusivity, about science communication. So I really kind of agree to that it should be inclusive. In my case, I am a marine scientist, and I had a training on science communication in Australia. So it's very easy for me really to translate scientific information to something that is usable and be very customized and understandable to the end users, like policymakers, politicians, community. So I think the key issue is you really have to know the full grasp, of that science, the scientific, the technical, as well as the strategy on how to translate it to something that is very understandable, like brochures, like posters, policy brief, and media releases. So I'd like to share my experience when I was interviewed by a certain media in Davao about 5 years ago. I think there is where responsible science communication comes in, because when I was interviewed, I think the one who interviewed me really don't have enough knowledge on science. So the information that I gave was not that exact message that I have told him. So it takes really to have some negotiation. John have stress about negotiation, so that there would be common understanding on what really the message is. When you go down to the end user level. In the case of Help Davao Network, I have used my knowledge and my skills on science communication. So we have drafted lots of brochures and posters for the community that we have adapted in one of the social units in Davao, Philippines. And now it has worked well, really, especially that this is related to the disaster risk reduction management. And I think it really helps the community. That information really is something that they hold on and they use during disasters like flooding.
Okay, so it's interesting that both of you have found resonance with each other. That there are these elements of inclusiveness, the element of negotiation, and also the public good. Let me take one step further, Grace. Normally, scientists are special people. They use language which only they can understand. They write papers which only they can read. How can we bring such knowledge to the common people? In Help Davao network, which you have described, we also have people who are politicians. How we bring this knowledge in a form, you say, whether it's pamphlet, whether you make some video, or how do you bring this knowledge to a politician who is so busy with so many other issues, for them to understand and for them to also be able to negotiate properly with scientists?
Yeah. As I have said, a scientist, a pure scientist, must be able to connect with a science communicator in the same way that a science communicator should be able to connect with the scientist. It's good for me because I am a scientist as well as a science communicator. So it's very easy to translate those ideas. In the Help Davao Network, we are organizing this READY, the Research Ecosystem for Development and Innovation. And it's composed of the different researchers from various universities and colleges. And this is the group that will really translate research output to science communication, like, for example, brochures, policy brief. And in fact, we have already started it. As one of the output of the UNESCO project on ABFAS, we have already started making policy brief, having it approved in the regional Research and Development Innovation Committee and in the Regional Development Council. And now this will be brought to the politicians in various provinces in Davao region for legislation. So the policy brief is very made simple, that it just doesn't have to include technical terms, jargons, etc. It just would go directly to the issues and the problems. Like, for example, in the case of seaweed, the policy brief that I have made for that, I directly included issues and problems on seaweed production, like the quality of water, and then the solutions, and then the recommendation. So that policy brief on seaweed would be to come up with a zoning policy, and that would be translated to a legislation by the politician.
Okay, that sounds very good. What is usually a policy brief? Is it a one page or half page?
Yeah,
or
it's a one page. It's just a one page. So not much of words, just direct to the point, and it should be very easily understood by even a politician.
But the
And
politician
second,
must trust you before you have this one page. This one page may be misinformation. How do you build trust with the politician that what you are going to present is good information?
yeah. Well, there there is information that this is based on a very scientific work, and maybe it's a report that is maybe 100 pages, but then we just included the very important. And we have also to consider that politicians would always look into also the economic side. So there, you should customize your policy brief in such a way that the bias of your reader should be included there, so that they can appreciate it, and they will accept it as their reference, probably for
Okay.
legislation.
Thank you, Professor Grace. I have to ask these tough questions because we have audience now. There are more than 100 people on Zoom, and there are many more on the Facebook Live. They are very eager to learn from you, and unless we have some tough questions to each other, we cannot bring this understanding. Let me now come to Joan. And normally, scientists are people in these white robes and wearing thick glasses in the back of their laboratories, people who really do not want to see anyone. They are very focused into their work. And if they're disturbed, their time is lost. How you bring those scientists to come forward and become communicators? That would be not so easy. How your center does that? How we encourage those scientists to become communicators?
I think you draw a certain picture of a scientist, Shahbaz. In Australia, I'm not sure that's always what our scientists look like. No, I mean, I think things are changing and they have changed. I think there's actually an interest and a hunger from the scientific community to talk about the impact of their work. And we've done some research on that. It has changed, especially in Australia in the last 20 years, where scientists see it as part of their responsibility. There's that word again. They see it as part of their responsibility to talk about their work. So actually, when I first started teaching in this area, which was a very long time ago, it was a challenge to make people interested. Now, what we find is we cannot put on enough seminars, workshops. People are coming through the door. They want to know how to communicate for impact. They want to know how to put their science out on multiple channels, like Grace was just talking about. They want to know how to communicate to politicians. So we actually don't find finding an audience of scientists difficult at all. And of course, scientists also have to compete for funding.
Yeah.
And so they really want to build that audience for their work.
Yeah, okay. That's where it would be interesting to learn more about the Australian case. For every project proposal which is written, so scientists are trying to solve some of the very difficult issues, whether it is, let's say in the present situation, it is to find a cure or a vaccine for corona, or to find a crop, for example, which is tolerant to drought, or to find solutions for the fish in the River Murray. There must be a process for that proposal to eventually come up with those answers, but also those answers which can be tailored for the different audience. So in that, there must be a big role of science communication to be embedded within those proposals. Can you please give us some idea? Do scientists come and seek your advice when they are starting such big projects, that how should they go about making sure that there is best possible science communication embedded into their work?
Yeah, increasingly what we're finding is for the biggest projects, the ones that might work on, for example, the Great Barrier Reef or the Murray-Darling, or that want to solve vaccine problems, or who are working in synthetic biology, they know that for their work to have sort of social acceptance and for them to be able to work in communities, they need to build community engagement into the very first parts of their field work or their laboratory studies. And so what we find are science communication experts or knowledge brokers come in right at the very beginning. And typically in Australia, if you are going for big funding from the government, for example, you will be talking about impact, and you will be talking about how you're going to work with communities to ensure that you have a positive impact. So it's kind of now built into the system.
Okay, I have a difficult question in this regard.
Oh no.
Let's say I'm doing a project about some very controversial issue. Murray-Darling Basin is very controversial, depending on who is looking at different aspects of water management. So scientists, if they start communicating before they have got the right evidence, or if they start speculating, start negotiating, and start putting things with what they think is likely result, that can also put science in disrepute. And we have cases like that in Australia as well, where people may not like a certain report, they may not like a certain plan, and there are cases where they have burnt those reports or plans. How do you go about bringing the right science communication at the right time? This is my question, knowing that this is also a problem with wherever we are. What is the right timing, and how do we make sure, as you said, negotiation? Is negotiation about the right information to be put there, or is the negotiation also about the timing of when the information will be available? And how do we make sure people who get too excited and say, we should close down this area, we should do this versus that, and then there are people who are at the receiving end, they say, proof, give me data, show me. So can you please guide us more on those aspects of excitement versus the timing, the responsibility?
Yep. So I think one of the things that when we talk about science communication, I think Professor Grace, she was just talking about, the platforms of science communication. Those can be brochures and websites and these kinds of things. But what we have to remember is that most of the time with science communication, we're talking about a science-society relationship. We're not just talking about the science. We're talking about science in a political system, in a culture that might have different values and norms. And so when I say negotiation, it isn't just scientists negotiating with each other or scientists negotiating with politicians. It's a multifaceted negotiation. And one of the most difficult things, I think, for scientists is to realize that in a social system, science may not always win. That sometimes political solutions or social solutions will win the day. And I think scientists feel really aggrieved by that. They hate that when that happens. But I think it's part of realizing the way that science fits into society. And that's another thing that science communicators work with. It's not just communicating from science to society, but it's communicating back. And it's saying, well, actually, we don't want that solution. And so then that's when the negotiation begins. So it can't just be one way. And negotiation has to take into account social values as well. And that's really the complexity of science communication. So science communication starts at the beginning when you plan. It goes through these processes that Grace is absolutely expert in, where you're negotiating with communities and you're negotiating with politicians, all the way to the end where you also have to negotiate with scientists about why their proposed result didn't win the day. And that happens sometimes.
Yeah. No, this is really a very interesting conversation that while the scientists go with hard facts, numbers which may be to the fourth or fifth decimal places in many cases, but at the end of the day, society has to decide, has to resolve an issue. I don't say solve, has to resolve. There are resolutions and need to come together with what is the consensus among society that we should go this way or that way. And scientists' role is to show what would be the consequences of doing this or versus that. So that's very well understood. Let me also ask you about your center, the Australian National Center for Public Awareness about Science. What do you do in a given day, dear Professor Joan, at the Australian National University, which is a well-regarded university in the world? What would you do on a day-to-day basis as the director of that center?
So we do quite a few different things. One of the things that we do is we educate. So we work with science students, some of who want to take degrees in a science and science communication. We have undergraduate, postgraduate, and PhD researchers. So we also do research. We look at public attitudes around the world to different kinds of science, and we study those. We also help with experimental engagement. So we think of new ways to engage audiences. And that might be in a science center, or it might be on a street corner, or it might be in a shopping mall, or it might be online on TikTok. So we do some experimental science communication. So an average day around here doesn't look very average. There's all kinds of exciting things going on. And we also, we run consultations with communities to find out, what they're thinking. So we do a wide variety of education, engagement, and research.
That's really interesting. That is a center which brings scientists, but very importantly, also the communicators. You have a
Yep.
PhD program. I have been to your center, wonderful center, and very bright young people working with you, doing PhDs and whatnot. They come from all over the world. What differences you find when people are coming from different cultural backgrounds? Their understanding of science communication is similar, or but when they start versus when they leave, what changes you see in them, and do you follow their careers also as scientists?
Oh, of course, yes. So, I mean, I think one of the important aspects of our center is the diversity that we have from around the world. And I'm not sure we're trying to change people's ideas so much because they come with really valuable cultural insights. So just recently, we've published a book, and I can make the link available. It's available free, where we were looking at cultural practices of science communication around the world. And the richness of cultural practices. So if you look at regions in Africa where there are a particular way in which you have a community consultation called a baraza, amazing, right? We need to learn from that. Or we have students come in, you know, they come from the Philippines, they come from Europe, and they come with different traditions of consultation. And some of them have worked in a science shop in Europe, right? Which is a very European kind of way of seeing these things. And so when we put all these ideas together, we can really think of new ways to engage audiences. So what we've found is by putting all this together in a center, we can harvest some of the best ideas around the world, but then we can go and we can evaluate those and look at what they're good at, because different methods are good at communicating to different audiences. We can look at what they're good at, and then we can learn from those. And that's been incredibly exciting. And to be able to introduce that variety of options for scientists, and then to turn around and say to scientists, look at all these ways you can engage. You don't have to be afraid of this, because there's this rich history of science communication around the world you can learn from. It's quite empowering.
So this is really a very great explanation. People coming from different cultures, and the different cultures of science research itself, scientific research itself, they come with many of the experiences which may include many barriers as well. In many of these societies, we are taught not to speak up to our seniors or superiors. But science is a field which needs to put the truth on the table very politely, but very firmly. So, this intercultural dialogue which is happening in your center is very amazing. And I also wish to note that you are proposing a UNESCO chair in this area. So I will come back to UNESCO chair idea in a moment, dear Professor Joan. And this global science communication publication, which Professor Joan has kindly mentioned, we will come back to it, but we will provide a link today. Joan, is it freely downloadable, right?
Freely downloadable, free.
Yeah. And we will also provide a link to Professor Joan's center. So for you to understand more about all the excellent work which is going on, please keep on putting your questions. And I see today the answers are coming fast from both of our guests. They are amazing. Okay, Grace, let me now turn to another issue. One of the projects we did in the Japan Fund Interest project is sustainability science. And you played a very important role. Help Davao Network is about water management, of course, which is a private, not-for-profit organization. Volunteers come together. In sustainability science, we bring social sciences, natural sciences, with people who will need those aspects to solve the real problem. Can you please give us an idea about how do you go about sustainability ideas with the communities in Davao? Who are the players who were working with each other?
Okay, so I'm very happy that sustainability science is now really emerging as a new discipline because I've been a researcher for, say, 35 years, and I really witnessed how fragmented our researches are. So that natural scientists stay here and social scientists stay here. But now with sustainability science, all the types of researchers and scientists are really negotiating and are really talking to each other. And the Help Davao Network is very, very fortunate that UNESCO was able to fund one of its projects on sustainability science. And uh, we were very successful with the project because we have seen really impact in the community. Like for example, the we have three components. The first component is when we provided flooding hazard maps to the communities, and they're aware now which are the parts of Davao City are very vulnerable to flooding and those which are not. And then we also have assessed their BRRM plans, and we have noticed that maybe there's still a lack of vertical and horizontal coordination among the key players. So when I say key players, I mean the government agencies, even the NGOs, the community, and also, in fact, they were happy that the UNESCO project was quite a venue for them to really convene and learn from each other. So I think sustainability science was really well demonstrated with that project by the Help Davao Network.
Yeah, this is an interesting example. And dear colleagues who have joined us by Zoom and by Facebook Live, we will put a link. Dr. Sati Suzuki will put a link to the final sustainability science reports, which are available. And of course, Dr. Grace can guide us as well. Uh, Dear Professor Grace, I have another question about communication in this. You have described people come from different backgrounds. There are academic people coming from the social sciences, people who are from the natural sciences, there are people who are managing disasters, and there are communities. Throughout my professional life, I found it very hard for people to let go of their jargon. Very difficult for even for them to speak even within the natural sciences themselves. How did this communication could take effect in sustainability science between social scientists who speak in a way natural scientists don't understand, and natural scientists to understand the social science? How does this happen that they started working together? What were the difficulties, if there were any, or they were already very willing and happy and they knew each other?
Yeah. So on the other hand, Dr. Shahbaz, I think that project by UNESCO was a very good venue for all types of scientists, whether social scientists, natural scientists, to really share their expertise. So we were very successful even in planning sessions, even during stakeholders consultation. So when we presented all the components of the project, and we kind of got the lots of inputs from various discipline, and it really helped the project came up with a very good result. So there was no problem about resistance from natural scientists or social scientists. There was cooperation. I think that was a very good model in itself.
So, in my view, because Help Davao Network was already there, you
Yeah,
have
so
been
right there.
working
And
for a long
yes, and the volunteers for the Help Davao Network have different expertise. We have different background also. So even from the Help Davao Network, there's already sharing of expertise within the network.
How long you have been working with Help Davao Network, dear Professor Grace?
Yeah, so Help Davao Network really started 2003, and I think you were one of those who initiated it together with Declan. I joined maybe 10 years ago. I already joined Help Davao Network. So, and I am very, very happy and very passionate about the vision and mission of Help Davao Network. That's why I'm very, very cooperative and participative of all its undertakings, from the projects of UNESCO down to the trainings and the empowerment for communities, especially also the youth, the young people. Remember, we have already trained young people on how to empower them for integrated water resource management. And it's very encouraging. So it's a matter of sustaining all those efforts. That's why I said sustainability science should be sustained. So we have to make sustainability science sustainable, because we should have follow through, because they are really very magnificent, wonderful results that we got in our project, and we need to follow it through until the SDGs are being realized and attained.
Okay, really, you have so many ideas. We need a whole day with you, Professor Grace, and of course, Professor Joan. The reason I ask you is to let people know that science communication doesn't happen in a project only for 10 days or for 3 months. We need to build our science, as has been said also by Professor Joan, this part of negotiation, to be part of the community, working together. Help Davao Network is an excellent example for 17 years, and your work is over 10 years. I've seen many of the friends who have become older like me, losing many here, of course, but also young people to grow up and take senior positions. So we have this culture of growing together, building understanding, and becoming better at communication of those results. So this is the example which is really very interesting. I will come back to you about the SDGs in a moment and the scorecard, which could be only possible through better communication. So, dear Professor Joan, tell us a bit more about this global science communication effort which you have done, and how can we benefit from this work which you have coordinated so excellently?
So I have to say, I learned more than I could have ever imagined. Reading the stories of science communication in 39 countries or regions with over 109 authors. The stories are extraordinary. So, you can look at places like the United States, which has had a coordinated effort in science communication around space, around agriculture, around biology, around climate for a very long time. And you can learn a lot about the policy settings that need to be in place, the institutions that need to be built for science communication. But then likewise, you can look to our own region and you can see amazing things happening. I mean, we just heard an amazing example from the Philippines, from Professor Grace, but there are other examples across our region where communities are kind of doing it for themselves and having amazing results. Anyway, it's a lovely volume that tells a lot of stories about the way science communication can happen, and how science communication is related to social initiatives. And some of those initiatives are negative, right? People are concerned about climate change. Many people are concerned about food security and the way in which science and technology, perhaps through genetic modification, will attempt to solve that problem. They have real concerns. And now I think the big thing, our one big next question for us is, how are we going to vaccinate the world when a vaccine is ready? And already people are coming forth saying they're very skeptical of vaccines. They're worried about them. How are we going to negotiate that? And so I think we need to think very hard about the best science communication we've done over the last 30 years and put that together to start solving this problem. And I saw a question in the Q&A around social media. It is absolutely part of the equation. We need to have good science communication on every platform. And that's part of what we have to do. So that's part of what we found when we looked at science communication around the world, that people are using every possible venue, and they're designing new platforms for science communication. And that's very exciting.
Wonderful. I have a follow-up question on this. Do you have this volume, which are experiences from around the world? You have coordinated them in a very nice way. We are meeting only today for about 50 minutes. We want to know more. We want to learn from you, learn from your center. Is it possible to offer a short course which can bring some of those colleagues, like a 1-week course which can be run with UNESCO? Or you think it's possible to bring those people and also bring those scientists, those community leaders who would benefit from it? What is your thought on this, Professor Joan?
Absolutely. If there's one good outcome, and there have been many, many disastrous outcomes of this pandemic, if there's one thing that has come out of this pandemic, it is that we have made greater use of technologies like the technology we're on now, Zoom, to be able to reach out across the world and do things like webinars, not just in our own region so that people don't have to fly there. We can actually do it, you know, and be a little bit more environmentally sustainable, but also share more around the world and especially in our region. So it's absolutely possible. We've been doing a number of webinars. We've also been calling them Zoom-posiums. We've had some Zoom-posiums. So all of this is possible, and we'd love to collaborate, and I'd love to collaborate with Professor Grace as well on such an initiative. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor John.
Yeah, I will get back on this to you, Joan. We will design with you a science communicators course, which can be jointly with your center and with Professor Grace and others. So, dear colleagues who have joined us today, stay tuned. There may be a possibility of a greater continuous professional development, I would say. If I can ask you one more question, dear Professor Joan, you are proposing a UNESCO chair. Can you tell us more about what would be the focus of your proposed chair? How do you see the world benefiting from what you are doing at the Australian National University with this National Center for Public Awareness about Science? How can we bring more of Australia to the rest of the world?
Yep. So we want to focus, you know, when I started talking about what responsibility is, and I talked about inclusiveness, negotiation, but what we really want to focus on with this chair is the public good.
Yeah.
We want to be able to define that for our region, to say people of our region, you know, in the Asia Pacific, here's some of their key concerns, here's what they care about, and to be able to curate scientific information and to do those practices of negotiation around the issues that people really care about. So it's kind of flipping it a little bit. It's not finding out what scientists want to tell people. It's going out there and finding out what the public would like to know or need to know about various scientific issues, and making sure we can match that up and really head for, you know, a public good result. And that, of course, dovetails with issues of impact, because we want science to have impact. But we also want people to have a forum to be able to voice their concerns and for those concerns to be addressed. And so that's what this chair will do. It's really going to look straight at that issue of the public good and talk about what that means for our region.
Yeah. So science communication as a public good to help improve society, and also very importantly to help us with leaving no one behind. That's sustainable development. I remember when we met first time face to face, and of course we have been exchanging emails on many issues. We met in Japan. Yes. And we have this Japan Fund in Trust. Well, they're doing a wonderful job with the network of science museums, creating awareness. And you have Questacon, Professor Graham, working with your center. Can you please give us some ideas of the role of such exhibitions and demonstration of science? How can they help us better understand the sustainable development goals? And I remember when I visited your center, there was a lot of discussion. How do we bring it to schools? Yep.
So, I mean, this is it. I mean, science centers around the world, especially in Japan. I mean, there's nothing better than going to Tokyo, to the science center there. It's really amazing. But science centers around the world have kind of taken on the challenge of communicating some of these very difficult topics to children, but also their families. So it's a really interesting form of communication, because on the one hand, you're talking to 8-year-olds, but their parents are there too. And that's a real opportunity to talk to two very different groups in one activity. And of course, science centers are, and this is a bit tragic actually, science centers are usually hands-on spaces. Now we're in the midst of a pandemic where you can touch nothing. And so science centers have really interestingly pivoted to online demonstrations, to helping people do their own at-home exploration. And that's really been exciting to see. So on the one hand, we have a rich resource in science centers around the world to work with communities and to work with schools and to make science fun in an informal setting. And now what we're learning right now, just this year, I think, is how to do global experiments. There's been some wonderful science festivals that have been, they roam around the world online over 24 hours. And these kinds of experiences that we can have virtually now that we can't interact with science in the same way. And so those are some things that, that my center's helped Science Center develop, are some of these things that you can do at home. And I can make some links to that you can share with the audience. Some of them are great fun. But yeah, so look, science centers are still a really important part of what I think of as the science communication ecosystem that need to be supported, but also need to be able to allow to grow in our current context. They may look a little different. Maybe you can't go in and play with something, but you can get online and they'll tell you how to have a certain experience with science. And I think that's, it's powerful and impactful, and we need to do a little bit more work experimenting with what's possible.
Yeah, and bringing virtual reality and augmented reality.
Augmented reality, perfect,
yeah,
yes.
Yeah, and continue with this capacity building, and that would be a very important part. So we are coming more towards the end, and I have some more questions to ask to Professor Grace. I've asked Joan about the SDG related and demonstration. Grace, you have also been working on sustainable development goals. Can you please tell us a bit more about this communication part in understanding the role of science in SDGs, and what did you come up with?
Okay, so one of the outputs of our APFAST project, the component 3 was on the SDG scorecard, and we are disseminating this one to the different universities and colleges in Davao region, and we have already conducted a series of trainings despite the pandemic. So it's thanks to the Zoom. So about 2 weeks ago, we already had training with the state colleges and universities, and they were very happy to learn about the scorecard, and they are now using it to kind of evaluate the projects as to how this contributes to the SDG. Okay, and next week we will also be conducting another training on the SDG scorecard to public or private HEIs, higher institution, educational institutions. So and we will, I think, be partnering also with UP, University of the Philippines people. So we're just negotiating on the terms and conditions, and our colleagues here in the region are very happy about the project of UNESCO and the Help Davao Network on that SDG scorecard, because by then they can really already learn how their projects, how the researchers can impact on the SDG.
Yeah. So SDG is a very complex topic. There are 17 sustainable development goals. Number one, of course, is there should be no poverty. No one should be poor in the world. We should make sure everyone has food. So there should be no hunger. And we should have good health, which is so important right now. And education is for everyone. And so we go on with each one of them. So certainly each one of those sustainable development goals need a transdisciplinary approach for resolving those issues. And there must be scientific evidence.
Yeah.
And there is a role of science, engineering, technology, innovation. And the public should be able to understand why we need to employ science to accelerate those SDGs. So can you please give us a final kind of opinion, the buy-in from the regional development board, which is very important, where you are bringing this knowledge to the political levels, to the levels of the bureaucracy, the relevant ministries. What is the reception from the regional development board, and how do you communicate with them?
First, we introduced the SDG, and I think they're already positive. The response is really positive because they are also into really supporting the attainment of the SDG. So I think we don't have hard time convincing them or letting them understand how important the SDG is, because I think we have common direction and common goals also. So Help Davao Network, we don't have a problem.
So because you are working for almost 17 plus years, you have developed this trust, you have brought inclusiveness, and very importantly, there is negotiation, which is about the role of science itself. And of course, whatever projects are being done, they are being done for public good, and communication helps with that. So that's really a wonderful example,
and
Professor.
also, Dr. Shahbaz, we really do our consultation in a pentahelix approach. So
Yeah.
meaning all sectors are represented: civil society, academic, government, NGO, and also media. So industry. So they are in. So we don't have any problem anymore of disseminating the importance of it.
So that's a wonderful example. I would request you to provide links. And if there are further questions from colleagues, they are welcome to send us by email, put them in question answer box, or also put it on Facebook Live. My last question to you, Professor Grace, we have this program with Japan Fund's interest, and you have been one of the key contributors. What would you like to see more? What would be your advice for the efforts in Asia Pacific for promoting science for sustainable development?
Okay, so I already have in mind that there should be three things that should happen if ever we will have some Japanese funds and trust through UNESCO. One is we should be able a part of the loop for the global science communication. Like we're happy. I am very happy that Professor Joan is really that accommodating also for us, as you mentioned that you will be collaborating with us. So that's the second with collaboration. The second is a science communications to be part of the research continuum. So I really agree with the statement of Professor John that it should be part of the proposal so that you already have a communication plan. When you design your research proposal, you should scientific paper, you should have already also have a communication plan. And it should be kind of consulted by the community so that there's already negotiation. Yeah. So and two-way negotiation. In this, I learned a lot from the Professor John. And also the third is I want to be emphatic. I want to repeat and reiterate what I've said that sustainability science should be made sustainable. So they should be follow through. There are a lot of very wonderful and amazing output of our project, UNESCO and Davao Network. So we should have follow through that so that they will really be translated to the attainment of the SDGs.
So thank you very much. Many, many good suggestions. And I'm sure Dr. Sachi is recording them. Let me also come to the final question to Professor Joan. Joan, thank you for those ideas. We will follow up on many of those things, science, communication as a public good, certainly. What would be your advice? And you have linked also very actively with Japan, and you're doing a great job in Australia. And you have also mentioned Africa today. And there are some colleagues from Somalia in the chat box, if you see them, and from the region. So what would be your advice for Japan Fund in trust-related work, science for sustainable development, and bringing the dimensions of science communication?
So I think Professor Grace, I'm going to start with Professor Grace's last suggestion about making these things sustainable, because she's so right. We tend to fund projects and then you can't follow through. You can't look at their impact as it goes forward. So a bit of a focus on impact. If we could, it sounds like, what's going on in the Philippines is just such a great example where we can trace that impact. And we have some examples here in Australia as well. But if we can, make a real effort at following through over many years, because communication just doesn't happen once. I think that's important. I think for our region, I think training can make a big difference. I think getting together in discussions like this and talking about other people's experience of science communication and making it better across the region. There are easy things we can do in terms of training. And so I would love to explore that. And that's a very exciting proposition. I think also we could do something, and you mentioned Japan, and I I just admire so much what happens with design in relation to our colleagues in Japan and the way they're able to design interactive media and things like this. I think this is a great collaborative project that really could take science communication to the next level across the region. If we could collaborate on some multicultural, really high-end science communication online, a project like that would be it would be very exciting.
Thank you very much. So many wonderful ideas. We are very thankful to Professor Grace and Professor Joan. Today, we have learned so much about this important area of science communication. And science communication's importance has never been so high as it is now. With this pandemic, certainly communication is a key area. Science communication is an important area. So we need to be inclusive. We need to make sure all stakeholders are included in while we are designing science, as the science results are being delivered. And we should be able to negotiate together, to talk to each other, to be able to understand different perspectives. And then very, very importantly, making sure science communication itself is a public good. And for that, we need scientists who understand science communication, but we also need dedicated science communicators. We need to bring science communication right from the beginning of the design of the concepts of ideas all the way to the delivery. And very importantly, maybe we need to continue to follow up. The center in Australia, Australian National Center for Public Awareness about Science, is bringing a multicultural approach, very important approach where many different perspectives are coming. And that enriches the experience, and that enriches how can we work together to solve big issues and state the facts very importantly. Professor Joan has mentioned a very important aspect that it's not science only which helps us decide on critical issues. The resolutions may have many other social and political considerations, and we need to bring the scientists to be able to understand those considerations as well. While the evidence base is very important, the resolution of the society to go to certain directions informed by science, but the final decisions may have many other considerations as well. So that's very important. And Professor Grace has given us an excellent example from Davao in Mindanao, where more than 10 years, the stakeholders have been working together. There are many volunteers who are scientists themselves. There are people from NGOs, and there are people who are politicians themselves who make decisions. There are people from the regional boards. And very importantly, the concept of sustainability science, which came from Japan Fund Interest, where we looked into the natural sciences and the social sciences, needed a lot of communication across disciplines, needed a lot of negotiation, and very importantly, it has become a public good knowledge there as well. And we need to continue to work on that. And that needs longer term effort. And the example for Davao is over a period of 17 years, and Professor Grace has ably contributed for more than 10 years. So we must have science grounded in society. It's not science only, it's science for society, science with society, and science moving forward together with society. Also, very importantly, the role of science museums, the role of demonstration. While in pandemics like COVID, we cannot touch and feel and experiment, we need to bring more virtual reality and augmented reality so that children can continue to learn and society can benefit from understanding of science, and we get rid of those myths which may be around. So that all is very important. The new UNESCO chair, which is proposed by Professor Joan's center and by herself, will focus on science communication as a public good. We look forward to working with this very important chair and the center, and also to make these links which are critical for us, all of us. Thank you for listening today. Thank you for your questions. And thank you to both excellent colleagues for promptly answering all those questions. And if there are more, we will be happy to answer in the usual way. So until our next webinar, we thank again Professor Grace and Professor Joan for giving us so many wonderful ideas. Certainly, we need to have a training program with more in-depth knowledge about science communication. All those publications mentioned, the links are provided, and you're most welcome to contact any one of us, and we will be happy to provide more information. Thank you, Professor Grace, and thank you, Professor Joan. Over to Sachi.
Thank you too.
Thank you very much, Professor Shahbaz and Professor Grace and Professor Leach and all participants. I would like to announce the next MFIT session. It will be a standardizing engineering qualifications with Asia Pacific. It will be held on Monday, 19th October. And please don't forget to fill the attendance list, which has been shared as a comment and chat box. If you wish to receive the certificate, we keep this open for 1 hour from now. And also please note that we may take some time to provide the certificate. Please don't worry if you register, we will provide certainly. And for further information, please visit our website and Facebook page and Instagram. We will keep you informed. We wish you a good day, stay safe, and see you all at the next session. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Joanne, and thank you, Grace and Sachi. Until we meet again.